Introduction. Close your eyes and journey with me across 1,000 years of history. Tonight, we explore one of the world's most enduring rivalries, England and France, two nations separated by just 21 miles of water, yet locked in a relationship of conflict, competition, and grudging respect that has shaped the modern world. This is not a story of villains and heroes. It's a story of two cultures evolving side by side, sometimes fighting, sometimes cooperating, always watching each other. From medieval battlefields to modern football stadiums, from contested thrones to culinary disputes, this rivalry has never truly ended. It's simply changed its form. Settle in, relax. And let's begin in the year 1066, when a French-speaking duke changed England forever. Chapter 1. The Norman Conquest. The rivalry begins, oddly enough, with France conquering England. In 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, we know him as William the Conqueror, invaded England and defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. With that single battle, England's trajectory changed forever. Here's something fascinating. For the next 300 years, England's king spoke French, not English. French was the language of the royal court, of law, of culture. English was the language of peasants. If you wanted to advance in society, you learned French. William brought French nobles with him, giving them English lands. The Anglo-Saxon aristocracy was almost entirely replaced. French words flooded into English. Words for government, law, art, and food. This is why English has two words for many things. The Germanic word cow, pig, sheep, for the living animal that peasants tended, and the French word beef, pork, mutton, for the cooked meat that nobles ate. But here's the irony. By conquering England, the Norman dukes created a problem for France. Now the King of England was also a powerful French duke, controlling lands in France itself. English kings owed feudal allegiance to French kings for their French territories, but they ruled England independently. It was a recipe for conflict. The situation got even more complicated. Henry II of England, through marriage and inheritance, controlled more of France than the French king did. By 1154, the Angevin Empire stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees. The King of France ruled mainly around Paris, surrounded by territories controlled by his theoretical vassal, the King of England. Imagine the tension. You're the King of France, supposedly the greatest lord in the land, but your most powerful vassal controls more territory than you do and commands greater resources. Every French king faced this humiliating situation for generations. Here's a curious detail. Richard the Lionheart, one of England's most famous kings, barely spoke English and spent only 6 months of his 10-year reign in England. He was thoroughly French in culture and spent most of his time in his French territories or on crusade. Yet English history remembers him as a great English hero. Chapter 2. The Seeds of War. The relationship between the two crowns swung between cooperation and conflict for 2 centuries. French and English nobles intermarried. Knights from both nations went on crusades together. Trade flourished across the Channel. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The French kings, particularly Philip Augustus, worked systematically to reduce English power in France. Philip was patient and clever. He exploited family conflicts among English royalty, supported rebellious barons, and slowly nibbled away at English territories. By 1204, he'd conquered Normandy, the ancestral homeland of England's royal family. This was a massive blow to English prestige. King John of England, Richard's younger brother, lost so much French territory that he earned the nickname John Lackland. The English barons, many of whom had lost their French estates, were furious. This contributed to the baronial revolt that forced John to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. But the loss of Normandy did something unexpected. It gradually made English kings more English. They spent more time in England, invested more in English institutions, and slowly began speaking English themselves. The separation was creating 2 distinct national identities where there had been one cross-channel aristocracy. Throughout the 13th century, the situation festered. English kings still controlled Gascony in southwestern France, still technically owed homage to French kings for it, still dreamed of recovering their lost French territories. French kings wanted to expel English influence from France entirely. Here's an interesting detail. The wool trade was at the heart of the economic relationship. England produced wool. Flanders turned it into cloth. France taxed the trade. Control of wool routes and cloth-producing towns became strategic concerns. Economics and politics were inseparable. By the 1330s, everything was ready to explode. The French king, Charles IV, died without a male heir. The question arose, who should inherit the French throne? One candidate was Philip of Valois, Charles's cousin. Another candidate was Edward III of England, Charles's nephew through his mother. The French nobility chose Philip, partly because they didn't want an English king and partly because they invoked Salic law, an ancient legal principle that said women couldn't inherit the throne or pass inheritance through the female line. Edward III was furious. He believed he had the better claim. In 1337, Philip VI confiscated Gascony from English control. Edward III responded by claiming the French throne for himself. The 100 Years' War had begun, though nobody called it that at the time, and nobody imagined it would actually last over a century. Chapter 3: Crusade and the Longbow. The early phase of the 100 Years' War was dominated by stunning English victories that seemed impossible. How did England, with perhaps 3 million people, repeatedly defeat France, with 15 million? The answer lies partly in a weapon, the English longbow. This was a simple wooden bow, 6 feet tall, requiring years of practice to master. English law required every man to practice archery regularly. The result was an army with thousands of skilled archers who could shoot arrows faster and farther than French crossbowmen. At Crécy in 1346, Edward III's army faced a French force perhaps 3 times larger. The French knights, in heavy armor, charged repeatedly. English archers, positioned on favorable ground, shot them down in waves. Arrows fell like lethal rain. The charge of French knights, the pride of European chivalry, was slaughtered. Here's a gruesome detail. English archers could shoot 10 to 12 arrows per minute. A single archer could have multiple arrows in the air at once. Contemporary accounts describe the sky darkening with arrows. Horses went down, throwing their riders. Knights in heavy armor couldn't get up easily and were killed where they lay. The Battle of Crécy shocked Europe. It showed that common English archers could defeat noble French knights. It challenged the entire social order of medieval warfare. The French were humiliated, and they would be humiliated again. 10 years later, at Poitiers in 1356, an English army under the Black Prince, Edward III's son, defeated a French army and captured King John II of France himself. The French king was taken prisoner to London and held for ransom. Imagine the shame. The King of France, held captive in England, his kingdom forced to pay an enormous ransom for his release. The ransom was set at 3 million gold crowns, equivalent to perhaps twice France's annual revenue. It took years to collect, and the burden fell heavily on the French people. Some of the ransom was never paid. King John, being an honorable knight, returned to England voluntarily when one of his sons who stood as hostage escaped. John died in London in 1364, still technically a prisoner. These defeats created a deep wound in French national pride. English armies rampaged across France almost at will, burning, looting, and taxing regions under their control. The French crown seemed helpless. Chapter 4: Joan of Arc and French Revival. By 1420, the situation had reached its nadir for France. The Treaty of Troyes, signed after yet another crushing English victory at Agincourt, declared that Henry V of England would inherit the French throne. The Dauphin, the rightful French heir, was disinherited. France, it seemed, would become part of an Anglo-French empire. But then something remarkable happened. In 1429, a teenage peasant girl named Joan appeared at the court of the Dauphin, claiming God had sent her to save France. She said she heard voices, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret, telling her to drive the English from French soil and crown the Dauphin as the rightful king. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? A 17-year-old girl with no military training, claiming divine inspiration, asking to lead armies. Yet the desperate Dauphin, with few options left, gave her a chance. Joan of Arc did something that military genius couldn't accomplish. She gave the French hope. At the Siege of Orleans, she inspired French troops to fight with renewed determination. Orleans was relieved. French armies began winning battles. The tide of war shifted. Here's something often overlooked. Joan was a brilliant psychological warrior. She dictated letters to English commanders, warning them to leave France or face divine wrath. She flew banners and wore distinctive armor, making herself visible on the battlefield. She turned warfare into a religious crusade, giving French soldiers a reason to believe they could win. The Dauphin was crowned King Charles VII at Reims Cathedral in 1429, with Joan standing nearby. For the first time in years, France had a properly crowned king, legitimacy restored. Joan's military career lasted only about a year. In 1430, she was captured by Burgundian forces, French nobles allied with England, and sold to the English. The English tried her as a heretic and witch. They needed to discredit her divine mission to restore their own legitimacy. In 1431, at 19 years old, Joan was burned at the stake in Rouen. But her impact outlasted her life. French morale had been restored. Charles VII proved to be a capable king, reorganizing the French military and gradually reconquering lost territories. By 1453, the English held only Calais in France. The 100 Years' War was over, and France had survived. Here's an interesting postscript. In 1456, a papal court retried Joan and declared her innocent. In 1920, she was canonized as a saint. The peasant girl who saved France became one of history's most famous figures, while the English kings who fought to rule France are mostly forgotten. Chapter 5: Peace and New Tensions. The end of the 100 Years' War in 1453 didn't end the rivalry. It simply transformed it. Both nations emerged changed. France, though devastated by war, was united under a strong monarchy. England, having lost its French territories, turned inward and soon descended into civil war. The Wars of the Roses. For several decades, England was too busy fighting itself to threaten France. French kings consolidated power, built stronger armies, and began transforming France into the most powerful nation in Europe. But then came Henry VIII of England and Francis I of France, two young kings who embodied renewed rivalry. Both were athletic, cultured, and ambitious. Both loved tournaments, hunting, and warfare. Both wanted to be seen as the greatest prince in Christendom. In 1520, Henry VIII and Francis I met at an event so lavish it's still called the Field of the Cloth of Gold. For 2 weeks, the two kings and their courts camped near Calais in pavilions made of cloth of gold, fabric woven with actual gold thread. They held tournaments, banquets, and entertainments designed to showcase their wealth and magnificence. Here's a delightful detail. At one point, Henry challenged Francis to an impromptu wrestling match. Francis won, throwing Henry to the ground. Henry was reportedly furious, and the incident nearly caused a diplomatic crisis. Imagine, two kings wrestling like commoners and international relations hanging in the balance. Despite the pageantry, the Field of the Cloth of Gold achieved nothing diplomatically. Within months, Henry allied with Francis's enemy, Emperor Charles V. The rivalry continued. The 16th century saw England and France repeatedly at war, though on a smaller scale than the 100 Years' War. They fought over Italy, over Scotland, over religion. When Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church, creating the Church of England, it added religious dimension to their rivalry. France remained Catholic. England became Protestant, though the situation was complicated under different monarchs. Mary, Queen of Scots, a French-raised Catholic claimant to the English throne, became a focal point of conflict. She was married briefly to Francis II of France, making her Queen of France as well as Scotland. French influence in Scotland threatened England directly. When Mary was forced to abdicate and eventually executed by Elizabeth I, Franco-English relations reached a dangerous point. Chapter 6: Global Competition. As Europe expanded globally in the 16th and 17th centuries, English-French rivalry went worldwide. They competed for colonies in North America, the Caribbean, India, and Africa. Every continent became an arena for their competition. In North America, the pattern was fascinating. France claimed vast territories: modern Quebec, the Great Lakes region, and the Mississippi Valley. New France, as it was called, was enormous but thinly populated. England's colonies on the Atlantic coast were smaller in area but had far more settlers. The competition played out through a series of colonial wars that mirrored European conflicts. When England and France fought in Europe, their colonists fought in America. These conflicts had wonderful names: King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George's War. Americans later called them all the French and Indian Wars. Here's something interesting. French colonists generally had better relations with Native American tribes than English colonists did. The French were more interested in trade than in taking land for settlement. They married into native communities, learned native languages, and built alliances. English colonists wanted land for farms and pushed native peoples aside. This meant that in colonial conflicts, France could field native allies alongside their smaller colonial forces, partially offsetting England's numerical advantage. The stereotype of French officers fighting alongside native warriors against English colonists has some historical basis. The rivalry extended to India, where both nations established trading companies. The British East India Company and the French Compagnie des Indes Orientales competed for influence with Indian rulers, trading posts, and ultimately territorial control. The battles of Plassey and Wandiwash in the 1750s and 1760s essentially eliminated French power in India, leaving Britain dominant. In the Caribbean, both nations established sugar colonies worked by enslaved Africans. Saint-Domingue, modern Haiti, was France's richest colony. Jamaica and Barbados were important British possessions. Pirates and privateers, often with unofficial government backing, raided each other's shipping and ports. The 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, what Americans call the French and Indian War, was the culmination of this global competition. It was fought in Europe, North America, India, the Caribbean, West Africa, and the Philippines. It was perhaps the first truly global war. Britain won decisively. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 gave Britain control of Canada and all French territory east of the Mississippi. France's North American empire was finished. France also lost most of its Indian territories. British national debt skyrocketed from the war's cost, but they'd effectively won the colonial competition. Here's an ironic detail. Britain's attempt to tax American colonists to help pay for the war that had just expelled French power from North America led directly to American colonial rebellion. The French, seeking revenge on Britain, would support those rebellious colonists, helping create the United States. Chapter 7: Revolution and Napoleon. The French Revolution of 1789 added ideological dimension to the rivalry. Britain was a constitutional monarchy with a powerful parliament and aristocracy intact. France overthrew its monarchy, executed its king, and proclaimed revolutionary principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Britain viewed revolutionary France with horror and fear. The execution of Louis XVI in 1793 shocked British society. Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger declared war on revolutionary France, beginning a conflict that would last, with brief interruptions, for 22 years. The French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars became the defining conflict between the two nations. France, under Napoleon, conquered most of continental Europe. Britain, protected by the Channel and the Royal Navy, remained unconquered and became the hub of anti-French coalitions. Here's something fascinating about this period. The rivalry produced mutual respect alongside hatred. British officers admired Napoleon's military genius even as they fought him. Napoleon admired British institutions and said that if he couldn't have been French, he'd have wanted to be born English. After his defeat, he sought British protection, hoping for asylum. Instead, he got exile on St. Helena. The Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 ensured British naval supremacy. Admiral Nelson defeated the combined French and Spanish fleets, eliminating Napoleon's ability to invade Britain. Nelson died in the battle, becoming one of Britain's greatest heroes. France never seriously threatened British naval dominance again. The Napoleonic Wars saw repeated cycles. Napoleon would defeat Austria, Prussia, or Russia on land. Britain would defeat French fleets at sea and fund another coalition. Neither could strike the decisive blow against the other. Napoleon controlled the continent. Britain controlled the oceans. The continental system, Napoleon's attempt to blockade British trade with Europe, hurt both sides. British merchants lost access to European markets. European consumers lacked British manufactured goods. Smuggling became rampant. The system was impossible to enforce fully and contributed to Napoleon's eventual downfall. Waterloo in 1815 finally ended it. The Duke of Wellington defeated Napoleon with crucial help from Prussian allies. Wellington and Napoleon never met personally before the battle, but they'd been fighting each other indirectly for years. Wellington through the Peninsula War in Spain and Portugal, Napoleon across various European battlefields. After Waterloo, British foreign policy focused on preventing any single European power from becoming dominant. They'd seen what French dominance looked like under Napoleon and didn't want to repeat the experience. For the next century, Britain would work to maintain European balance of power, often opposing whichever continental nation seemed strongest, which was frequently France. Chapter 8. Victorian Rivalry. The 19th century after Napoleon's defeat saw Britain and France as rivals who sometimes cooperated but never fully trusted each other. They had parallel empires, parallel ambitions, and parallel interests that sometimes aligned and sometimes conflicted. Both nations competed for influence in the declining Ottoman Empire. The Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, was unusual because Britain and France fought as allies against Russia. It was strange for both nations. Generals who'd fought each other at Waterloo 40 years earlier now found their countries allied. The alliance worked but felt unnatural to many. In the 1850s and 1860s, a genuine panic swept Britain. Fear of French invasion. Napoleon III, nephew of the original Napoleon, had made himself Emperor of France in 1852. His very name revived British anxieties. What if this new Napoleon tried to invade England as his uncle had planned? The invasion panic led Britain to build massive fortifications along the southern coast, huge circular forts called Palmerston Forts after the Prime Minister who championed them. They cost enormous sums and were obsolete almost before completion. Napoleon III had no intention of invading, but British fears ran deep. Here's a curious cultural detail. Victorian Britain was deeply Francophobic in some ways while also Francophilic in others. The British upper classes learned French, visited Paris, and admired French culture. But popular culture viewed France with suspicion. The traditional enemy, Catholic and autocratic, at least under Napoleon III, continental and alien. French stereotypes of the British were equally contradictory. The British were seen as cold, hypocritical, obsessed with money and commerce, lacking in culture compared to sophisticated France. Yet British parliamentary democracy and industrial might commanded grudging respect. The competition for empire accelerated. Britain and France both colonized Africa in the late 19th century. They competed for influence in Southeast Asia, Britain in Burma and Malaya, France in Indochina. They competed in the Pacific Islands, the Middle East, and anywhere else that could be claimed. The Fashoda Incident of 1898 nearly caused war. British and French forces both claimed the same territory in Sudan. For weeks, war seemed possible. Eventually, France backed down, recognizing British dominance in Egypt and Sudan in exchange for British recognition of French control in other African regions. But growing German power was changing European dynamics. By 1900, Germany had become the strongest military power on the continent and was building a navy to challenge Britain's. Both Britain and France began to see Germany as a greater threat than each other. Chapter 9. Entente and World Wars. In 1904, something remarkable happened. Britain and France signed the Entente cordial, the friendly understanding. After centuries of rivalry, They were becoming allies. The Entente wasn't a military alliance initially, just an agreement to resolve colonial disputes peacefully. But it marked a fundamental shift. Why the change? Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II's aggressive foreign policy, combined with German naval building and continental ambitions, threatened both Britain and France. The enemy of my enemy became my friend, even if that friend was your traditional rival. When World War I began in 1914, Britain and France fought as allies for the first time in centuries. British and French soldiers fought side by side in the trenches of the Western Front. The alliance was sometimes strained. French generals thought British forces insufficiently committed. British leaders worried about French morale after terrible losses, but it held. Here's a touching detail. British soldiers learned snatches of French. French soldiers learned bits of English. They shared cigarettes, rations, and the nightmare of trench warfare. A generation of British and French soldiers formed bonds that their ancestors would have found incomprehensible. The wars produced interesting cultural exchanges. "Cane fate reign. It doesn't matter," became an English soldier's phrase for fatalistic acceptance. British humor and French wine helped both armies cope. Shared suffering created shared respect. World War II tested the alliance more severely. The fall of France in 1940 was traumatic for both nations. Britain fought on alone while France was divided between Nazi occupation and the collaborationist Vichy government. General Charles de Gaulle led Free French forces from London, but relations between de Gaulle and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill were often tense. Churchill ordered the destruction of the French fleet at Mers el-Kabir in July 1940 to prevent it falling into German hands. Over 1,200 French sailors died, killed by their recent allies. It was a bitter necessity that poisoned Anglo-French relations. Many French never forgave the British. Many British felt they'd had no choice. Yet Free French forces fought alongside British troops throughout the war. When D-Day came in 1944, British, American, and Canadian forces landed on French beaches to liberate France. The liberation of Paris was given to the Free French forces as a matter of honor. France would liberate its own capital. The wars transformed the rivalry. 2 centuries of fighting as enemies, then 30 years of fighting as allies, changed how both nations saw each other. They were no longer primary rivals, but partners with complicated history. Chapter 10: Post-War Partnership and Rivalry. After 1945, Britain and France faced similar challenges: recovery from devastating war, decolonization of their empires, and adjustment to diminished status in a world now dominated by the United States and Soviet Union. Their responses diverged in fascinating ways. France suffered occupation and humiliation during the war. Its Fourth Republic was politically unstable. In 1958, Charles de Gaulle returned to power, established the Fifth Republic, and pursued an independent foreign policy. De Gaulle wanted France to be a great power on its own terms, not a junior partner to anyone. Britain initially saw itself as a global power, maintaining its special relationship with the United States and its Commonwealth ties. The British Empire gradually transformed into the Commonwealth of Nations. Britain maintained military presence globally, from Germany to Singapore to the Falklands. The Suez Crisis of 1956 revealed changed realities. Britain and France, along with Israel, invaded Egypt to secure the Suez Canal. The United States forced them to withdraw, humiliated. For many historians, Suez marked the end of British and French pretensions to independent great power status. Both learned they couldn't act against American wishes. European integration became the new arena of Anglo-French relations. France was a founding member of what became the European Union. Britain stayed out initially, reluctant to surrender sovereignty, still viewing itself as more than just a European nation. When Britain finally applied to join in the 1960s, de Gaulle vetoed the application, twice. His reasoning was that Britain was too Atlantic-oriented, too close to America, not truly European in outlook. He didn't trust British commitment to European integration. Here's a delicious quote from de Gaulle, speaking of Britain. "How can you govern a country which has 246 varieties of cheese?" He was actually talking about France, but the principle applied to his view of Britain too diverse, too individualistic, too difficult to integrate into a European project. Britain finally joined in 1973 after de Gaulle's retirement and death. But British membership was always ambivalent, never joining the euro, negotiating opt-outs from various agreements, one foot in Europe, one foot out. The relationship had interesting cultural elements. French cuisine became fashionable in Britain. French wines dominated British tables. British music, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, later Britpop, was popular in France. Fashion went both ways. Tourism flourished. Britons vacationing in Provence and the Côte d'Azur, French tourists visiting London and the Lake District. Yet mild antagonism persisted. British tabloids mocked French strikes, French agricultural subsidies, French pretensions. French media portrayed Britain as declining, obsessed with past glories, cuisine challenged. National football and rugby matches between the two became proxy wars, passionately contested. The Channel Tunnel, opened in 1994, physically connected the two nations for the first time since the Ice Age. You could now travel from London to Paris by train. The tunnel was controversial in Britain. Many feared it compromised their island security, made them too European. Old anxieties died hard. Chapter 11. Modern Rivalry. In the 21st century, the England-France rivalry has become something curious. A rivalry without real stakes, but one both sides still take seriously, especially in cultural and sporting contexts. Brexit, Britain's 2016 vote to leave the European Union, revived some old tensions. From a French perspective, Britain had always been a reluctant, awkward European partner. Now they were leaving, validating French doubts about British commitment. From a British perspective, European integration had gone too far, threatening British sovereignty and identity. The Brexit negotiations were sometimes tense. French President Emmanuel Macron took a hard line, insisting Britain couldn't have access to European markets without accepting European rules. British negotiators portrayed this as French intransigence. Old stereotypes, British pragmatism versus French rigidity, British flexibility versus French bureaucracy, resurfaced in Brexit rhetoric. Yet cooperation continues where it matters. Britain and France are both nuclear powers, both permanent members of the UN Security Council, both significant military powers. They cooperate on security, intelligence sharing, and defense. French and British forces work together in various international missions. Here's an interesting military detail. Britain and France signed the Lancaster House Treaties in 2010, committing to deep defense cooperation. They even agreed to develop a joint nuclear testing facility. Two nations that once tried to conquer each other now coordinate nuclear weapons research. History has a sense of irony. The rivalry lives most vigorously in sport. Six Nations rugby matches between England and France are intense affairs. When England plays France in football, soccer, national pride is on the line. The matches matter more than others. There's history in every contest. Cultural competition continues too. French and British chefs debate whose cuisine is superior. French wines compete with English sparkling wines. British wine production has improved dramatically with climate change. English sparkling wine now rivals champagne in blind tastings, to French chagrin. French cinema versus British film, French fashion versus British design, French intellectuals versus British pragmatists. It's rivalry as performance now, ritual and tradition more than genuine conflict. Both nations know they're not going to war. But the rivalry provides identity, a way of defining themselves against a familiar other. Here's something charming. Polls show that Britons visit France more than any other foreign country. French tourists love London. The nations that fought each other for centuries now vacation on each other's territory. Former enemies are now each other's favorite foreign destination. Chapter 12. The Cultural Legacy. The England-France rivalry has produced extraordinary cultural richness. Each nation defined itself partly in opposition to the other, and that opposition drove creativity, innovation, and achievement. English literature is filled with French influences and French characters, sometimes noble, often villainous. Always interesting. Shakespeare's Henry V depicts the English king conquering France, But Shakespeare was writing for an English audience that would appreciate seeing France conquered, even in historical drama. French literature depicts England with equal complexity, sometimes admired for its parliamentary system and individual liberty, sometimes mocked for its damp weather, bad food, and emotional repression. Voltaire admired English intellectual freedom. Victor Hugo lived in exile in the Channel Islands and wrote about England with mixed fascination and disapproval. The English language is profoundly influenced by French. Somewhere between 30 to 40% of English vocabulary comes from French, a legacy of the Norman conquest and centuries of contact. We speak a hybrid language, Germanic in structure, with an enormous French vocabulary overlay. Every time an English speaker uses words like government, parliament, justice, or liberty, they're speaking French words anglicized over centuries. Food culture shows their rivalry beautifully. The French pride themselves on cuisine. The word itself is French. French cooking became the international standard of fine dining. French techniques dominate professional kitchens worldwide. But British food has undergone a revolution in recent decades. Modern British cuisine, often using French techniques but British ingredients and sensibilities, has gained respect. The rivalry drives both sides to culinary excellence. Fashion is another arena. Paris has long been the fashion capital, home to haute couture and legendary designers. But London fashion, especially street fashion and punk influences, offers a different aesthetic, raw, more rebellious, more youth-oriented. Each nation's fashion reflects its culture, French elegance and tradition versus British innovation and rule-breaking. Wine versus beer as the civilized drink, France championing wine culture, Britain traditionally championing beer and pub culture. Of course, Britons drink enormous amounts of French wine now, and craft beer culture has reached France. But the stereotypes persist, defining national identity through preferred beverages. The rivalry even shapes how history is taught. English school children learn about English victories, Agincourt, Trafalgar, Waterloo. French school children learn about French glory, Joan of Arc, the Sun King Louis XIV, Napoleon's brilliance. Each nation's historical narrative emphasizes its own achievements and downplays defeats. The same events look different depending on which side of the channel you study them from. Chapter 13. What the rivalry reveals. The England-France rivalry reveals profound truths about human nature, national identity, and history itself. First, proximity breeds competition. 21 miles of water separate Dover from Calais at the channel's narrowest point. That's near enough to be threatening, far enough to allow distinct cultures to develop. If England and France were further apart, they might have ignored each other. If they shared a land border, one probably would have conquered the other permanently. The channel was close enough for rivalry, far enough for survival. Second, rivalry drives excellence. Each nation pushed the other to achieve. British naval innovation partly responded to French threats. French military reforms partly answered British challenges. A competition in empire building, industrialization, culture, and cuisine made both nations more dynamic than they might have been in isolation. Third, enemies can become allies when facing greater threats. Germany in the 20th century proved more dangerous to both than they were to each other. The ability to set aside centuries of rivalry for practical cooperation shows that national interests can override historical grudges. Though the grudges don't disappear, they just become less important. Fourth, national identity needs an other to define itself against. England partly defined Englishness as not French, and France did the same in reverse. The Protestant versus Catholic divide reinforced this. The political systems, British constitutional monarchy with strong parliament versus French absolutism, until the Revolution, were deliberately contrasted. Each nation's virtues were implicitly defined as the opposite of the other's vices. Here's something psychologists would recognize. The rivalry involves what they call the narcissism of small differences. England and France are actually quite similar. Both are European, both are former imperial powers, both have rich cultural traditions, both face similar modern challenges. But precisely because they're so similar, they emphasize their differences to maintain distinct identities. Fifth, time transforms everything. A rivalry that began with the Norman conquest, intensified with the Hundred Years' War, continued through colonial competition and Napoleonic conflict, has become something almost affectionate in the modern era. A rivalry that both sides enjoy, that provides entertainment and cultural richness without threatening real harm. The rivalry has produced some of history's most dramatic moments: Joan of Arc burning at the stake, Napoleon pacing on St. Helena, Nelson dying at Trafalgar, the Dunkirk evacuation, the D-Day landings. Each of these moments involves both nations, defining each against the other. Chapter 14. Modern Perspectives. How do modern English and French citizens view each other? It's complicated, layered with history, stereotypes, genuine knowledge, and willful ignorance. A 2018 survey found that large majorities in both countries view the other favorably, around 60 to 70% positive feelings. But that leaves 30 to 40% who maintain traditional suspicions. Among those who think about it at all, the rivalry remains psychologically real, even if politically obsolete. British stereotypes of the French: arrogant, obsessed with rules and bureaucracy, likely to strike or protest at any provocation, dismissive of Anglo-Saxon culture, too intellectual, cheese-obsessed, wine-drinking, somehow both lazy, long lunches, generous vacation time, and productive. France has similar GDP per capita to Britain. French stereotypes of the British: cold and emotionally repressed, obsessed with class distinctions, terrible at cooking, addicted to tea, drunk on weekends, speaking only English and expecting everyone else to accommodate them, somehow both reserved and hooligans, depending on whether you meet them at a museum or a football match. Of course, stereotypes are caricatures. Modern Britain and France are diverse, multicultural societies. London and Paris are both global cities with populations from everywhere. Young people in both countries often have more in common with each other than with their grandparents' generation. But the stereotypes persist because they're fun, because they provide shortcuts for understanding, and because there's often a grain of truth wrapped in layers of exaggeration. They're part of how both nations tell stories about themselves. Here's something interesting. Both nations claim to have invented modernity in different ways. Britain claims to have invented parliamentary democracy, the Industrial Revolution, and the modern world economic system. France claims to have invented human rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, political revolution, and modern republican government. Both have legitimate claims. The rivalry over who invented the modern world continues the historical pattern: competition over everything, even credit for progress. The rivalry appears in unexpected places. Eurovision Song Contest voting: Britain and France almost never give each other high scores, even when their entries are good. United Nations debates: they often take opposing positions. Climate change negotiations: they compete to be the leader in green policy. Even COVID-19 responses were implicitly compared, each nation watching the other's approach with mixture of concern and schadenfreude. Yet when crises strike, cooperation emerges. After the 2015 Paris terrorist attacks, the British government lit up London landmarks in French colors and offered full support. When Britain faced Russian chemical weapon attacks, France backed British positions. The rivalry doesn't prevent solidarity when it matters. Chapter 15. The Channel Between. The English Channel, La Manche to the French, has been the defining geographic feature of the rivalry. 21 miles of water that have shaped 1,000 years of history. For England, the Channel was security. It made invasion difficult, though not impossible. William the Conqueror and the Norman invasion proved that. But after 1066, no successful invasion of England occurred. The Spanish Armada failed. Napoleon's invasion fleet never sailed. Hitler's Operation Sea Lion was cancelled. The Channel saved England repeatedly. For France, the Channel was frustration. England was close enough to interfere in French affairs, to hold French territories, to land armies on French soil, but far enough that France couldn't definitively defeat England. French kings dreamed of crossing the Channel. Few succeeded. The Channel created different national psychologies. England developed an island mentality, the sea as moat, the nation as separate from the continent, ties to maritime empire stronger than ties to Europe. France developed a continental mentality, land borders with multiple neighbors, threats from all directions, the need for strong armies and fortifications. Here's a meteorological detail. The Channel's weather is famously terrible. Fog, storms, and rough seas have protected England as much as the Royal Navy. The Spanish Armada was defeated partly by storms. Napoleon's invasion plans were confounded partly by weather. D-Day was nearly postponed due to Channel weather. Even modern ferries and the Channel Tunnel sometimes close due to storms. The Channel is a natural defense that still operates. The Channel has shaped culture in subtle ways. English as a language evolved differently because of island separation. French cuisine developed continental influences from Italy, Spain, and Germany. British cuisine developed differently, incorporating more preserved foods suitable for sea voyages and island isolation. The creation of the Channel Tunnel in 1994 was psychologically significant for both nations, but especially Britain. For the first time since the last ice age, Britain was physically connected to the continent. Some Britons feared this loss of island status. Some welcomed easier European integration. The tunnel became a symbol in Brexit debates, physical connection to Europe that some Britons wanted to reverse. Here's a curious fact. DNA evidence shows that British and French populations share significant genetic ancestry, particularly in northern France and southern England. The Channel has separated cultures and politics, while populations on both sides remain genetically similar. Political rivalry overlays biological kinship. The Channel region itself has unique character. The Channel Islands, British Crown dependencies that are closer to France than England, speak their own languages, Norman French dialects, and maintain customs from both cultures. Normandy, just across from England, has deep historical connections to England dating to 1066. The Channel creates not just division, but also a hybrid border zone with mixed identity. Chapter 16. Future of the Rivalry. What does the future hold for this ancient rivalry? In a globalized world where both nations face similar challenges, climate change, immigration, economic competition with Asia, terrorism, populism, does the rivalry still matter? The answer seems to be yes, but in transformed ways. The rivalry has become primarily cultural and sporting rather than military or political. But cultural and sporting rivalries can be intense in their own right, and they tap into the same historical roots. Climate change may ironically bring the two nations closer. Both face similar challenges: rising sea levels threatening coastal areas, changing weather patterns affecting agriculture, the need to transition to renewable energy. The Channel itself may become less significant if sea levels rise dramatically. Geography that shaped their rivalry for a millennium could change. European politics post-Brexit creates new tensions. Britain outside the EU, but geographically part of Europe, must manage complex relationships with European nations, especially France. Trade agreements, fishing rights, immigration control, security cooperation, all require ongoing negotiation. The potential for friction remains. France is now clearly the dominant military power in Western Europe after Brexit. French President Macron has called for European strategic autonomy, Europe developing its own military capabilities independent of the United States. Britain, outside the EU but maintaining its special relationship with America, represents a different vision. The old rivalry over leadership may continue in new forms, but there are also forces bringing them together. Both are medium powers in a world dominated by superpowers: America, China, potentially India. Both face similar immigration challenges and similar debates about national identity in multicultural societies. Both have aging populations and similar economic structures. Common challenges could overcome historical rivalries. The younger generation views the rivalry differently than their elders. Young people in both countries are more likely to see European identity as complementary to national identity. They're more likely to have friends, partners, or family connections across the Channel. Social media and easy travel have created connections that transcend national boundaries. Here's something to ponder. If Scotland becomes independent, still a live possibility, and if Ireland reunifies, also conceivable, what becomes of England? France would still be France, but England would be diminished, perhaps just England and Wales. How would that affect the psychological balance of the rivalry? The rivalry may become increasingly nostalgic, something both nations remember and occasionally perform but don't take as seriously as their ancestors did. Like sports fans maintaining traditional rivalries even when both teams are mediocre, England and France may continue their rivalry partly because it's tradition, partly because it's fun, partly because it provides continuity with the past. Chapter 17. Lessons from a Millennium. What can we learn from 1,000 years of England-France rivalry? Several lessons emerge from this long, complex history. First, geography is destiny, but not unchangeable destiny. The Channel shaped the rivalry, but human decisions determined how that geographic fact translated into history. Other nations separated by water, like Japan and Korea, or Indonesia and Australia, developed different relationships. Geography provides constraints and opportunities, but human choices matter. Second, national identity is constructed, not eternal. England and France have meant different things in different eras. Medieval England was culturally French at the top and English at the bottom. Modern France includes people from around the world. National identities evolve, adapt, and change while maintaining continuity with the past. Third, enemies can become allies when circumstances change. The alliance that fought World War I would have been unimaginable to medieval contemporaries. The European Union, which France helped found and Britain joined, represents cooperation that reverses centuries of competition. History is not destiny. Fourth, cultural exchange occurs even during conflict. English language, architecture, law, and culture show deep French influences. French language has English loanwords, though the Académie Française tries to resist them. War and rivalry didn't prevent mutual influence. Sometimes they accelerated it. Fifth, competition can be productive. The rivalry pushed both nations to excel in various fields. Without French competition, would Britain have built such a dominant navy? Without British industrial competition, would France have modernized as quickly? Rivalry provided motivation for achievement. Sixth, historical memory is selective and serves present purposes. Both nations remember their victories more than their defeats. The history taught in schools emphasizes national glory. Historical narratives justify present national identities. The past is always interpreted through the lens of the present. Seventh, humor and self-awareness can defuse rivalry. Modern English and French people often joke about their rivalry, acknowledge stereotypes while recognizing them as stereotypes, and maintain friendly competition without real hostility. The ability to not take rivalry too seriously makes it sustainable and even enjoyable. Eighth, small differences become magnified between similar peoples. England and France have far more in common than either has with, say, China or Saudi Arabia. But precisely because they're similar, they emphasize their differences. This psychological dynamic appears in many rivalries. Neighbors often have sharper conflicts than distant peoples. Closing. Reflecting on rivalry. As you settle into sleep, consider the strange journey these two nations have traveled together. From the Norman conquest to Brexit, from the 100 Years' War to the Channel Tunnel, from Joan of Arc to the Six Nations rugby, the relationship has been constant in its inconstancy. Always there, always changing, always important. The rivalry has produced magnificent achievements and terrible tragedies. It has inspired great art, literature, and music. It has motivated military innovation, political development, and cultural creativity. It has also caused immeasurable suffering. All those soldiers dead in medieval battles, sailors drowned in naval combat, civilians caught in countless wars. Was it worth it? That's perhaps the wrong question. The rivalry wasn't a choice individuals made. It was the product of geography, history, and innumerable small decisions by countless people over centuries. It simply was a fact of European history as solid as the Channel itself. What's remarkable is how the rivalry has transformed without disappearing. Nations that spent centuries trying to conquer each other now compete over football matches and Eurovision voting. That's not a small achievement. It suggests that even the deepest historical antagonisms can evolve into something less destructive, even while maintaining continuity with the past. Both nations face uncertain futures. Climate change, technological disruption, demographic shifts, and global power transitions challenge all established orders. How England and France navigate these challenges, separately or together, will write new chapters in their long, intertwined story. But for tonight, rest in the knowledge that this rivalry, for all its sound and fury, has produced a rich, complex shared history. Every language borrows from other languages. Every culture influences, and is influenced by neighbors. England and France, despite centuries of conflict, created each other as much as they fought each other. The rivalry tells us something profound about human nature. We define ourselves partly through opposition. We know who we are partly by knowing who we're not. But opposition doesn't require hatred. Modern England-France relations show that rivalry can coexist with respect, that competition can be friendly, that historical enemies can become, if not friends, then something more interesting. Familiar rivals who understand each other deeply precisely because they've competed for so long. Sleep well, knowing that history is not just battles and kings, not just treaties and territories. It's also the subtle interweaving of cultures, the gradual evolution of relationships, the transformation of enmity into competition, competition into cooperation, and cooperation into whatever comes next. The story of England and France isn't finished. New chapters will be written by future generations who inherit this long, complicated history. They'll carry forward the rivalry in whatever form suits their time, perhaps as teammates facing global challenges, perhaps as competitors in new arenas we can't yet imagine, perhaps as something else entirely. But the channel will still be there, 21 miles of water connecting and separating two nations that have spent a millennium defining themselves partly through their differences from each other. Geography endures. Culture evolves. History continues. Good night. May your dreams be filled with peaceful gardens, not battlefields, though if you dream of Joan of Arc or Nelson, Wellington or Napoleon, Shakespeare or Molière, they're worth remembering too. They're all part of this long, fascinating story of two nations, their rivalry, and the strange friendship that rivalry eventually became. Rest well. The rivalry that shaped a millennium continues in quieter forms, reminding us that even the deepest conflicts can transform into something less destructive, something almost affectionate, something uniquely human. Good night.